The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving white. Sophia Bellini pressed her trembling fingers against the cracked screen of her phone, watching her husband's name illuminate the display. 3 rings. 4. 5. Her other hand gripped the metal railing of the hospital bed, knuckles bone white against the sterile surface. The call went to voicemail. She tried again. This time it rang once. Then silence. He had seen her name. He had dismissed it. In a penthouse across the city, Dante Bellini glanced at the buzzing phone on the marble counter, saw his wife's face flash across the screen, and turned away. Across from him, her best friend laughed at something he'd said, wine glass catching the light. He silenced the call. Back in the ER, Sophia's hand fell limp against the sheets, the phone slipping from her weakened grip. The doctor was speaking, but she couldn't hear the words anymore. Something inside her, something that had been holding on for 3 years, finally let go. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And sometimes, by the time they realize what they've done, we're already gone. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. The rain had started sometime around midnight, streaking the windows of Mercy General Hospital like tears no one had permission to cry. Sophia stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in each square, trying to anchor herself to something real. The 4 drip beside her bed marked time in steady pulses, each one a reminder that her heart was still beating even when she wished it would just stop hurting. Mrs. Bellini. She turned her head slowly, the movement exhausting in ways she couldn't explain. Dr. Chun stood at the foot of her bed, clipboard pressed against her chest, expression carefully neutral in the way only medical professionals could manage. Your test results came back. Sophia's throat tightened. She'd known something was wrong for weeks. The fatigue that never lifted. The dizziness that sent her grasping for walls and furniture. The way food had become her enemy, her body rejecting everything she tried to give it. How bad? Her voice emerged as a whisper. Dr. Chun hesitated. That hesitation said everything. We found some irregularities in your blood work. Combined with the symptoms you've described, the exhaustion, the weight loss, the fainting spells, we want to run more comprehensive tests. But Sophia, the doctor's professional mask slipped, revealing something that looked dangerously close to sympathy. When was the last time you slept through the night? When was the last time you ate a full meal? Sophia couldn't remember. The days had blurred together in a haze of waiting. Waiting for Dante to come home. Waiting for him to notice. Waiting for some sign that she still existed in his world. I've been stressed, she managed. This is beyond stress. Dr. Chun moved closer, lowering her voice. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. Your body is showing signs of prolonged emotional and physical neglect. This isn't something that happens overnight. This is. I need to call my husband. Sophia reached for her phone again, fingers trembling. He should be here. The words tasted like a lie even as she spoke them. She'd called him 4 times in the last hour. 4 times he'd let it ring. 4 times he'd chosen silence. But still she dialed. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, his voice, cold, impatient, barely present. Sophia, I'm in a meeting. Whatever it is can wait. Dante, I'm in the hospital. I said I'm busy. Gianna and I are discussing the charity gala. We'll talk later. The line went dead. Sophia stared at the phone, something cracking behind her ribs. Gianna, her best friend. The woman she'd trusted with her secrets, her fears, her loneliness. The woman who had somehow become the priority Sophia could never manage to be. Dr. Chun watched her patient's face crumble, watched the light dim behind those warm brown eyes. Mrs. Bellini? Is someone coming? Sophia set the phone face down on the bed. When she looked up, her expression had shifted into something the doctor didn't recognize. Something hollow, something decided. No, she whispered. No one's coming. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline of Manhattan, Dante Bellini pocketed his phone without a second thought. The Italian script tattooed along his neck caught the ambient lighting as he turned back to face the woman lounging on his leather sofa. Gianna Moretti smiled at him over the rim of her wine glass, red lips curving in a way that demanded attention. She had demanded attention since the moment they met, a force of nature wrapped in designer silk and practiced charm. "Everything okay?" she asked, though her eyes betrayed no real concern. "Sophia." He dismissed the name with a wave of his tattooed hand, the intricate patterns across his knuckles flexing with the movement. "She calls about nothing. Every time I step out of the house, it's something new." Gianna's smile widened slightly. "She's always been needy." The word hung in the air like poison, and Dante didn't disagree. He should have. Some part of him, the part that remembered who Sophia had been when they first met, all fire and warmth and stubborn devotion, knew he should defend his wife. But that part had grown quiet over the years, drowned out by business deals and blood feuds and the relentless machinery of his empire. "The gala," he said, steering the conversation back. "I want everything perfect. The Marconi family will be there, and after what happened with their son. Leave it to me." Gianna rose from the sofa, her designer dress shifting like water over her curves. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something sharp and expensive that Sophia would never wear. "I know exactly what you need." She placed a hand on his forearm, fingers trailing over the dark lines of his tattoos. The touch was casual, familiar, the kind of touch that had become routine without Dante ever noticing when it started. His phone buzzed again. He didn't look at it. "Now," Gianna continued, her voice dropping to something intimate, "let's talk about the seating arrangements. I was thinking I should be at your table. To help with the hosting duties, of course. Sophia isn't exactly equipped for this kind of event." Dante's jaw tightened, but he nodded. His wife hadn't attended a public event in months. She'd stopped trying after the last gala, after he'd spent the entire evening discussing territory disputes with Gianna, while Sophia stood alone by the windows, watching the city lights blur through what he later realized were tears. He hadn't asked why she was crying. He hadn't noticed until she'd already wiped them away. "Fine," he said. "Whatever you think is best." Gianna's satisfaction was barely concealed. "Perfect." On the marble counter, Sophia's name flashed one final time before the screen went dark. The call went unanswered. In a hospital room across the city, Sophia watched her phone screen dim and made a decision that would change everything. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, rain still misting against the windows of the hospital. Sophia signed her discharge papers with a hand that barely felt connected to her body, ignoring Dr. Chen's protests about additional testing and rest requirements. "Mrs. Bellini, I strongly advise." "I know." Sophia offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I need to go home." Home. The word felt strange now. The penthouse hadn't felt like home in years. Not since Dante had stopped sleeping beside her, stopped taking meals with her, stopped seeing her as anything more than a fixture in his carefully controlled world. She collected her belongings. A cashmere cardigan, her wedding ring that had grown loose on her thinning finger, her phone with its graveyard of unanswered calls, and walked out of Mercy General Hospital with the numbness of someone who had already left her life behind. The town car was waiting at the curb. Of course it was. Even in his neglect, Dante was efficient. He'd probably sent it automatically, some assistant program to handle the minor inconveniences of his wife's existence. "Where to, Mrs. Bellini?" The driver, a young man she didn't recognize, met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Sophia gave the address of the penthouse. Then she leaned her head against the rain-streaked window and watched the city blur past, wondering when New York had stopped feeling like home. When she arrived at the building, the doorman greeted her with the polite disinterest of someone paid to be invisible. The elevator carried her upward in silence, floor numbers climbing like a countdown to something inevitable. The penthouse doors opened to reveal exactly what she expected. Empty, cold, a space designed for power, not warmth. Sophia moved through the rooms like a ghost haunting her own life. The bedroom they hadn't shared in months, Dante's pillow perfectly unwrinkled, The closet filled with designer clothes that hung on her frame now, evidence of the weight she'd lost without him noticing. The kitchen where she'd stopped cooking elaborate meals because no one was there to eat them. She found herself in the study, the one room she rarely entered. Dante's domain. Walls lined with books he didn't read. A desk covered with papers she wasn't supposed to see. Photographs in silver frames. Their wedding day, her face bright with joy she could no longer remember feeling. On his desk, she spotted something that made her blood freeze. A jewelry box. Small, velvet, expensive. The kind of box that held promises. She shouldn't open it. She knew she shouldn't. But her hands moved without permission, fingers lifting the lid to reveal. A diamond bracelet. Delicate. Feminine. Nothing like the bold statement pieces Dante had given her over the years. A gift card was tucked inside. The handwriting wasn't Dante's. For G. Something to remember last night. D. The bracelet slipped from Sophia's fingers, landing silently on the carpet. Gianna. The room tilted. Sophia gripped the edge of the desk, her vision swimming. Dr. Chen's warnings about her health suddenly screaming in her ears. Her heart was racing, too fast, her body threatening to betray her again. But she didn't cry. She was beyond tears. She walked to their bedroom closet and pulled a suitcase from the top shelf. Then, methodically, she began to pack. Only the essentials. Only what was hers. Nothing he'd bought her. The jewelry, the designer clothes, the trappings of a life that had never really belonged to her. She packed her mother's necklace. The books she'd brought from her old apartment. The photographs of her family that Dante had never hung on the walls because they didn't match the aesthetic. She packed until the suitcase was full. Then she sat on the edge of the bed they'd once shared and wrote a letter she'd been composing in her heart for years. Dante, I called you from the hospital last night. For times. You didn't answer. I've been disappearing for months now, and you never noticed. I've been drowning in this life you built for us, and you never reached out your hand. I found the bracelet. I know it's for Gianna. I don't know how far it goes, and I've realized I don't have the strength left to find out. I loved you. I loved you with everything I had. And it wasn't enough. I waited for you to see me. I waited for you to choose me. I waited until waiting became all I was. But I can't wait anymore. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't look for me. I'm not hiding. I'm just finally letting go. You chose her. Over and over, you chose her. Now I'm choosing myself. Sophia. She folded the letter, placed it on his pillow, and took off her wedding ring. The diamond caught the afternoon light as she set it on top of the paper, a small circle of broken promises. Then Sophia Bellini picked up her suitcase and walked out of the penthouse without looking back. 3 hours later, Dante came home. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt wrong, though he couldn't immediately identify why. He loosened his tie, the motion revealing more of the Italian script tattooed along his throat, and moved through the space with the distracted efficiency of a man whose mind was elsewhere. The Marconi deal had fallen through. 3 months of negotiations, hundreds of thousands in bribes, and it had collapsed because someone had talked. His blood was still humming with the cold fury of betrayal, his knuckles aching from the conversation he'd had with the informant. He needed a shower, a drink, his wife. The thought surprised him. When was the last time he'd actually wanted Sophia's presence? The last time her quiet warmth had seemed like anything other than an interruption to his real life? He couldn't remember. Sophia. No answer. Dante moved to the bedroom, unbuttoning his shirt, revealing the dark ink that sprawled across his chest and shoulders. The bathroom was empty. The closet door stood open, gaps visible where her clothes should have been. His pulse stumbled. On the bed, a single sheet of paper waited. A diamond ring glinted beside it. Dante picked up the letter. Read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. I called you from the hospital last night. For times. You didn't answer. Hospital. She'd been in the hospital. While he'd been drinking wine with Gianna, laughing about charity seating arrangements, his wife had been. I found the bracelet. I know it's for Gianna. His blood turned to ice. The bracelet. He'd forgotten to move it, too focused on business to remember the gift he'd bought for the charity auction. The donation that would cement his public image as a generous benefactor. It wasn't for Gianna. It had never been for Gianna. But Sophia didn't know that. Sophia, who had watched him spend every evening with her best friend. Sophia, who had made excuses for his absences, his coldness, his complete inability to see her. Sophia, who had been in the hospital while he silenced her calls and told her she could wait. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called again, and again, and again. Pick up. His voice cracked, something he hadn't allowed in years. God damn it, Sophia. Pick up the phone. Voicemail. Every time. He called his security team, his voice stripped of its usual cold authority. Find her. I don't care what it takes. Find my wife. Then Dante Bellini, the most feared mafia boss on the eastern seaboard, sank onto the edge of his empty bed and realized, for the first time in 3 years, exactly what he had lost. Days bled into nights. Dante's men searched every hotel in the city, every rental property, every safe house connected to the Caruso family. Sophia had vanished like smoke, leaving no trail, no forwarding address, no breadcrumbs for a man who had never learned to follow. He stopped sleeping. The nights stretched endless and cruel, filled with memories he'd pushed aside for too long. Sophia on their wedding day, her smile so bright it hurt to remember. Sophia waiting up for him after a deal gone wrong. Warm tea and warmer hands, ready to ease the tension from his shoulders. Sophia slowly learning to stop waiting, stop hoping, stop existing in any way that required his attention. He'd watched her fade and done nothing. He'd watched the light dim in her eyes and told himself it was her problem to fix. He'd chosen everything else over her, business, power, control, until she'd finally stopped giving him the choice. His right-hand man, Marco, found him in the study at 3 in the morning, surrounded by surveillance reports and cold coffee. Boss. Marco's voice was careful, the way it always was when delivering bad news. The hospital confirmed she was there that night. Emergency room admission for severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and elevated cortisol levels. The doctor said she was showing signs of... Signs of what? Marco hesitated. Signs of what? Dante's voice cracked like a whip, the sound echoing off the study walls. Chronic neglect. Marco met his boss's eyes, unafraid despite the dangerous energy radiating from Dante's frame. The doctor's exact words. She said Mrs. Bellini's body was shutting down from prolonged emotional and physical neglect. She wanted to keep her for observation, but Sophia checked herself out against medical advice. The words hung in the air, each one a blade. Chronic neglect. He'd neglected her so thoroughly that it had made her sick. His absence, his coldness, his constant dismissals, they had literally broken her body. Dante's tattooed hands pressed flat against the desk, his knuckles white, his chest tight with something he didn't know how to name. And Gianna? His voice was deadly quiet. What do we know about Gianna? Marco's expression shifted. You're not going to like it, boss. Tell me anyway. She's been spreading rumors, telling people that you and she are involved, that you're planning to leave Sophia for her. Some of your business associates have heard the stories. The Marconi family. That's why the deal fell through. The realization hit Dante like a physical blow. They thought I was compromising the alliance by humiliating my wife. It looks like it. Gianna has been very thorough. She made sure everyone saw her at your side, made sure they noticed Sophia's absence, made sure the narrative was clear. Dante's jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. He had been played, and in his arrogance, his distraction, his complete failure to pay attention to his own wife, he had let it happen. Find Gianna. His voice was ice. Bring her to me. Marco nodded and disappeared. Dante remained alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of his failure. His wife's wedding ring burning a hole in his pocket where he'd kept it since the night she left. I loved you with everything I had. And it wasn't enough. The words echoed in his skull like a curse. He would find her. He would find her and make her understand that the bracelet meant nothing, that Gianna meant nothing, that the only thing that had ever truly mattered was the woman he'd spent 3 years learning to ignore. But even as he made the vow, a small, honest voice in the back of his mind whispered what he already knew. He was too late. Sophia stood at the window of a small apartment in Brooklyn, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. It had been 2 weeks since she'd left the penthouse, 2 weeks since she'd turned off her phone and stopped existing in Dante Bellini's world. The apartment belonged to Elena, her cousin, the one family member she'd managed to keep secret from Dante's thorough background checks. Elena had taken one look at Sophia's hollow eyes and protruding collarbone and pulled her inside without a word. "You look like death," Elena had said, her blunt honesty exactly what Sophia needed. "I feel like it." "Good thing you're here, then. Death doesn't stand a chance against my cooking." 2 weeks later, Sophia had gained back 3 pounds and regained enough strength to stay awake past 8 in the evening. Small victories, measured in bites of food and hours of sleep and moments where she didn't think about him at all. Those moments were rare. Dante invaded her thoughts at the worst times. In the shower, where the hot water reminded her of his hands on her skin in the early days. In bed at night, when the empty space beside her felt like an accusation. In the quiet mornings when she reached for her phone to text him before remembering that her phone was buried in the bottom of a drawer, powered off, dead. He was probably looking for her. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he'd found the letter, found the ring, and felt nothing but relief. Maybe Gianna was already living in the penthouse, wearing Sophia's abandoned clothes, sleeping in Sophia's abandoned bed. The thought should have hurt more than it did. "You're doing it again." Elena appeared beside her, pressing a mug of tea into Sophia's hands. "Thinking about him. Is it that obvious? You get this look, like someone's hollowing you out with a spoon." Sophia laughed despite herself, the sound rusty from disuse. "That's disgustingly accurate." "I know. I'm a poet." Elena settled onto the window seat, her sharp eyes never leaving her cousin's face. "Has he tried to contact you?" "I don't know. The phone's been off." "Good. Keep it that way." Elena's voice hardened. "That man had 3 years to notice you were drowning, and he spent them holding your head underwater. He doesn't get to play the worried husband now." Sophia stared into her tea, watching the steam curl upward. "I keep wondering if I should have tried harder, fought louder, made him see." "Stop." Elena gripped her arm, forcing eye contact. "You are not allowed to blame yourself for his failures. You gave that man everything you had, and he took it without ever bothering to say thank you. That's on him, not you." Tears pricked Sophia's eyes, the first she'd allowed since leaving the penthouse. "I loved him, Elena. Despite everything, I loved him." "I know." Elena's voice softened. "That's what makes it worse." They sat in silence as the rain continued to fall, 2 women watching the world blur outside a window neither of them owned. 3 blocks away, a black car idled at the curb, its occupant speaking rapidly into a phone. "I found her." Marco's voice was barely audible over the rain. "Brooklyn. I'm sending the address now." In a penthouse across the river, Dante Bellini received the message and was out the door before his right-hand man could disconnect the call. He stood outside the building for 20 minutes before finding the courage to go inside. The Dante Bellini who commanded a criminal empire, who had ordered men's deaths without blinking, who had built his reputation on cold, calculated power, that man had never been afraid of anything. But standing in the rain outside a Brooklyn apartment, knowing his wife was somewhere above him, alive and safe and choosing to exist without him, he was terrified. The tattoos on his knuckles were visible as he rang the buzzer, dark lines against pale skin, symbols of control that suddenly felt meaningless. A woman's voice crackled through the intercom. "Not Sophia." "Who is it?" "Dante Bellini. I'm here to see my wife." Silence. Then, "Go to hell." The intercom went dead. He buzzed again, and again, and again. "I'm not leaving until I see her." "Then I hope you brought an umbrella, because you're going to be there a long time." Dante pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the door frame, rain soaking through his suit, running in rivulets over his tattooed skin. "Please." The word felt foreign in his mouth. "Please. I just need to know she's okay." More silence. Then a different voice, soft, tired, familiar in ways that made his chest ache. Go home, Dante. Sophia. Sophia. Her name emerged broken, desperate. Let me explain. The bracelet, it wasn't for her. It was for the charity auction. I would never. It doesn't matter. It does matter. You think I was having an affair, but I wasn't. I swear on my life. I know you weren't. Her voice was eerily calm. I figured it out about a week ago. The jewelry box had the auction tag in the bottom, and I realized I jumped to conclusions. Relief flooded through him, immediately followed by confusion. Then why? Because even though you weren't sleeping with her, you were choosing her. Over and over, Dante. Every dinner you missed, every phone call you ignored, every time you looked through me like I wasn't even there. You were telling me exactly where I ranked in your life. And it wasn't high enough. The words cut deeper than any blade. Sophia, please, let me in. Let me fix this. You can't fix this from a lobby. You can't fix 3 years of making me feel invisible with one conversation in the rain. A pause. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. I called you from the hospital. I was scared and sick, and I needed you. And you told me to wait because you were busy with Gianna. I didn't know. You didn't ask. The intercom crackled with what might have been a sob. You never asked. You just assumed that whatever I needed could wait, because whatever I needed was never as important as everything else in your life. Dante pressed his palm flat against the door, imagining he could feel her warmth through the cold metal. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I know I don't deserve another chance. But you're right. You don't. The intercom went silent. He stayed there for 3 hours, buzzing periodically, speaking her name into the rain like a prayer. She didn't respond again. When Marco finally pulled up with an umbrella and a pointed suggestion that the boss was going to catch pneumonia, Dante allowed himself to be guided to the car. But he didn't go home. He went to find Gianna Moretti. Gianna's apartment occupied the top floor of a luxury building in Soho, purchased with money Dante now suspected had been siphoned from his business accounts. He didn't knock. His men had already secured the entrance, and when he walked through her door, she was waiting for him on a white sofa, looking unsurprised. Dante, she smiled, but there was something brittle behind it. I've been expecting you. He stood in the center of her living room, rain still dripping from his suit, his tattooed hands hanging loose at his sides. The control he'd cultivated for decades was barely holding. You knew. It wasn't a question. Gianna's smile flickered. Knew what? You knew Sophia was falling apart. You watched her disappear, and you did nothing. Worse than nothing, you made sure it happened faster. Sophia is weak. Gianna's voice hardened. She was never right for you. A man like you needs someone who understands your world, not some soft little wife who cries when you come home late. She was my wife. The words tore from Dante's throat. She was mine and you. She was in the way. Gianna stood, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood. And I did what needed to be done. The Marconi deal? I made sure it failed. Your reputation as a faithful husband? I made sure everyone knew you were spending your nights with me instead of her. Sophia running away? I made sure she found that bracelet with just the right note to push her over the edge. The confession hung in the air. Dante's vision went red. You wrote the note. Of course I did. Gianna moved closer, apparently unaware of the danger. Sophia never would have left on her own. She loved you too much. But give her evidence of betrayal, plant enough seeds of doubt, and even the most devoted wife will eventually break. She reached for his arm, fingers grazing the tattoos that wound around his forearm. It's better this way, Dante. Now you're free. Now we can. His hand closed around her wrist, grip hard enough to bruise. You're done. Gianna's eyes widened. What? Whatever future you imagined with me, it doesn't exist. It never existed. And after what you've done to my wife, you should be grateful I'm letting you walk away at all. He released her wrist, watching her stumble backward, her facade finally cracking. Dante, you can't. I can. And I am. He turned toward the door, then stopped. Your accounts will be frozen by morning. Your access to my businesses, my contacts, my world. All of it ends now. If I ever see your face again, if I ever hear that you've so much as whispered Sophia's name, I will destroy you in ways that won't leave enough evidence for a funeral." He left without looking back. Behind him, Gianna's screams echoed through the empty apartment, but Dante was already gone, already planning his next move, already trying to calculate how to fix something that might be permanently broken. 3 days later, Sophia woke to find flowers on Elena's doorstep. White roses, her favorite, wrapped in brown paper with a small card attached. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me try." She threw them away. The next day, more flowers arrived. Different this time, yellow tulips, the ones she'd mentioned loving in a conversation years ago. A conversation she'd assumed he hadn't been listening to. "I remember everything you ever told me. I just never knew how to prove it until you were gone." She threw those away too. But on the third day, when Elena brought in a small package addressed in Dante's familiar handwriting, Sophia hesitated before opening it. Inside was a leather journal, old and worn, filled with her husband's cramped writing. She read the first entry. "March 15th, 3 years ago. Wedding day. She looked at me like I was worth saving. I don't deserve it, but I'm going to spend my life trying to be the man she sees." The entries continued, sporadic but consistent over the years. Notes about her favorite coffee order, observations about the way she laughed when she was truly happy, confessions about the pressure of his world and how guilty he felt for bringing her into it. "She's pulling away. I can see it happening, but I don't know how to stop it. Every time I try to tell her how much she matters, something comes up. Something always comes up. She stopped waiting up for me. The bedroom is dark when I come home now. I should wake her. Should tell her I'm sorry. Should be the husband she deserves. But I don't know how anymore. Gianna says Sophia seems distant lately. Maybe I should take her on a trip. Just the two of us. But the Marconi deal is coming up, and I can't leave right now. I'll make it up to her. I always say that. I never do." The final entry was dated the night she'd left. "She called from the hospital and I didn't answer. I didn't answer, and now she's gone. And I deserve every moment of this pain. I spent 3 years watching the best thing in my life slip away, and I told myself I'd fix it later. There is no later. There is only this empty apartment and her ring in my pocket and the knowledge that I destroyed something I can never rebuild. But I have to try. Even if she never forgives me, I have to try." Sophia closed the journal with shaking hands. She didn't throw it away. 1 week passed, then 2, then 3. Sophia started leaving Elena's apartment, taking slow walks around the neighborhood, rebuilding her strength one city block at a time. She saw Dante's men on the corners sometimes, discreet, distant, watching without approaching. He was having her protected even though she'd asked him to stay away. She shouldn't have found it comforting. She did anyway. The journal lived on her nightstand now, read and reread until the pages were soft with handling. His words played on repeat in her mind, mixing with the memories of their early days, when he'd looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. He had loved her. Somewhere beneath the cold exterior and the endless business dealings and the complete inability to prioritize his own heart, he had loved her. It didn't fix what was broken, but it made her wonder if broken things could be rebuilt. Elena noticed the shift. "You're thinking about going back." "I'm thinking about a lot of things." "That's not a no." Sophia sighed, staring out at the Brooklyn skyline. "He hurt me, Elena. For 3 years, he made me feel like I didn't exist. And now he's sending flowers and journals and having his men watch over me like I'm something precious. And I don't know how to reconcile those two versions of the same man." "So don't." Elena moved to stand beside her. "Don't try to figure out who he was or who he is. Ask yourself who you need him to be, and then make him prove he can be that person. Not with flowers. Not with pretty words. With actions, Sophia. With time. And if he can't, then you walk away again. But at least this time you'll know for sure." Sophia turned her wedding ring over in her palm. Elena had fished it out of the drawer where Sophia had buried it, claiming it was too valuable to leave forgotten. The diamond caught the light. She made a decision. The coffee shop was small and warm, tucked away on a quiet Brooklyn street far from Dante's usual territory. Sophia had chosen it deliberately, neutral ground, public space, no chance of being swept up in the intensity of his presence. She saw him before he saw her. He was standing outside, hesitating by the entrance, and the sight sent a jolt through her chest. He looked different. The circles under his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. His jaw shadowed with more than stubble, his usually impeccable suit slightly rumpled. The tattoos on his neck stood out in sharp relief against his pale skin. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He looked like a man who had finally realized what he'd lost. Sophia raised her hand, a small wave that caught his attention through the window. Dante moved toward the door like a man approaching his own execution. When he sat across from her in the tiny booth, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance, neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Sophia broke the silence. "You look terrible." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I feel worse." "Good." He accepted the word without flinching. "I deserve that." "You deserve a lot more than that." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drawing warmth from the ceramic. "I read your journal." His jaw tightened. "Then you know. I know you loved me. I never doubted that, Dante. Love was never the problem." She met his eyes, making sure he saw the pain she'd been carrying. "The problem was that your love was silent. It was hidden in journal entries and occasional gestures and a protection I never knew existed. And while you were loving me in secret, I was dying in plain sight." "I know." His voice cracked. "Sophia, I know. And there's nothing I can say that." "You're right. There's nothing you can say." She leaned forward, holding his gaze with an intensity that made him go still. "So stop talking. Stop explaining. Stop apologizing. Stop trying to convince me with words. If you want me back, if you really want to fix what you broke, then you need to show me. Every day. For as long as it takes." Hope flickered in his dark eyes, quickly suppressed. "You're giving me a chance? I'm giving you the opportunity to earn one." She pushed back from the table, gathering her things. "Same time tomorrow. Be here or don't." "But Dante." He looked up at her, his tattooed hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "This is your last chance. If you fail me again, if you choose anything over me one more time, I'm gone. And I won't come back." She walked out without waiting for his response. Behind her, Dante Bellini sat alone in a Brooklyn coffee shop and began planning how to win back the woman he should never have lost. He was there the next day, and the day after, and the day after that. Every morning, Dante arrived at the coffee shop 30 minutes before their meeting time, securing the same booth, ordering her favorite drink, and waiting. He brought his phone but never looked at it. When business calls came in, he let them go to voicemail. When Marco texted urgent updates about the Marconi situation, he responded with 2 words: "Handle it." Sophia watched him change. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't easy. Years of learned behavior didn't disappear overnight, and there were moments when she saw him fighting the urge to check his messages, to prioritize the crisis of the moment over the woman sitting across from him. But he fought, and slowly, incrementally, he won. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of 3 years of distance. She told him about the loneliness, the nights spent wondering if she'd made a mistake marrying him, the way Gianna had slowly poisoned their relationship with whispered suggestions and manufactured isolation. He listened without defending himself. She told him about the hospital, about the doctor's careful words, about the moment she'd realized her own body was shutting down from the weight of being invisible. His tattooed hands shook when she described it. "I almost killed you." The words emerged strangled. "My neglect. It didn't." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his knuckles. The first voluntary touch she'd allowed since leaving. "I'm still here. You shouldn't be." He captured her hand, holding it like something precious. "You should have left years ago. You should have walked away the first time I chose a business deal over dinner with you, or took a phone call in the middle of our anniversary, or looked through you like you weren't even there." "Probably." Her voice was soft, But I loved you too much to give up. And now? The question hung between them, weighted with fear. Sophia studied his face. The dark circles, the vulnerable eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was terrified. This man who had built an empire on control and power was terrified of losing her. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like the beginning of something new. Now, she said quietly, I'm learning that loving you doesn't have to mean losing myself. And you're learning that loving me means putting that love into action. Not just words. I'm trying. I know. She squeezed his hand. That's why I'm still here. For weeks later, Sophia received a phone call from Dr. Chun. Her test results had finally come back, run on samples she'd provided during a follow-up visit. The news was better than expected. Her cortisol levels were normalizing. Her weight was climbing back toward healthy, and the physical symptoms of prolonged stress were finally beginning to fade. Whatever you're doing differently, Dr. Chun said, keep doing it. What Sophia was doing differently was allowing herself to be seen. She'd moved back into the penthouse. Slowly, cautiously, one personal item at a time. Her books now occupied a shelf in Dante's study, their spines a deliberate interruption in his wall of business texts. Her photographs hung in the living room, family faces smiling from frames he'd hung himself. Her presence had reclaimed every room she'd once haunted like a ghost. And Dante was learning. He came home for dinner now, phone silenced and attention undivided. He woke her when he arrived late, pressing kisses to her forehead rather than slipping silently into the bed they'd started sharing again. He asked about her day and listened to the answers, memorizing details he'd once let slip away. It wasn't perfect. He still struggled with the instinct to prioritize crisis over connection. Old patterns died hard, and there were moments when Sophia caught him reaching for his phone out of habit, moments when the tension of his world threatened to pull him back into old behaviors. But each time he stopped himself. Each time he chose her. And slowly, the trust Sophia had lost began to rebuild. The night everything changed again started like any other. Sophia was in the kitchen, attempting a recipe she'd found online, when Dante came through the door earlier than expected. His expression was tight, controlled in the way she'd learned to recognize as barely suppressed fury. What happened? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved toward her, hands settling on her waist, pulling her close with an urgency that made her breath catch. Dante, what happened? The Marconis. His voice was rough against her hair. They made a move. Someone gave them information, internal information, and they're using it to push a hostile takeover. Sophia pulled back enough to see his face. What kind of information? Shipping routes, safe house locations, names of people under my protection. His jaw clenched. The kind of information that could get people killed. How did they? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He released her, stepping back, and Sophia recognized the shift. The cold calculation settling over his features, the transformation into the man who commanded an empire. For a moment, she waited for the old pattern to resume. For him to disappear into his study, shut her out, handle the crisis alone while she watched from the margins of his life. But Dante paused at the doorway. I need to handle this, he said slowly. But I want you to know what's happening. If things go badly, if the situation escalates, I need you to be prepared. It was such a small thing, such a simple thing, but it meant everything. I'll be here, she said. Whatever you need. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like desperation and gratitude and something close to love. Then he was gone, disappearing into the study with his phone already pressed to his ear, his voice dropping into the cold authority of Dante Bellini, the Mafia boss who had never known mercy. But before he shut the door, he looked back at her. I'll be home for dinner, he promised. No matter what. And 3 hours later, when the crisis was still unfolding but his word had been given, Dante Bellini sat down across from his wife and ate the dinner she'd prepared, his phone silenced on the counter, his attention fully and completely hers. The threat intensified over the following days. The Marconi family had apparently decided that Dante's recent distraction, His focus on reconciling with Sophia instead of crushing his enemies made him vulnerable. They pushed harder, testing boundaries, making moves that demanded response. Dante responded, but for the first time in his career, he did it differently. He delegated more than he ever had before, trusting Marco and his other lieutenants with responsibilities he'd always clutched close. He held strategy meetings in the penthouse rather than at undisclosed locations, ensuring Sophia was never left wondering where he was or when he'd return. He kept her informed, not about everything, but about enough that she understood the danger and could prepare accordingly. "You're different," Marco observed during a late-night briefing. More what? More human." Marco shrugged, apparently unafraid of his boss's reaction. "The men are noticing. Some of them think it's weakness. Let them think what they want." Dante's eyes found Sophia through the study doorway, where she sat reading in the living room, completely unaware of his attention. "I'm done letting this life consume everything I care about. And if the Marconis interpret that as an invitation, then I'll remind them exactly who they're dealing with." The cold edge returned to Dante's voice, his tattooed hands flexing with controlled violence. "I'm choosing to be better for my wife. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me someone who finally understands what's worth fighting for." The battle with the Marconis came to a head on a Thursday night. Dante had received intelligence about a planned attack on one of his warehouses, and the timing required his physical presence. But as he prepared to leave the penthouse, arming himself with the efficiency of a man who had survived countless similar nights, Sophia appeared in the doorway of their bedroom. "Be careful." 3 years ago, she wouldn't have said anything. She would have watched him leave in silence, uncertainty eating at her stomach, not knowing if he would come back. Now, she stood in front of him and demanded his attention. Dante crossed the room, cupping her face in his tattooed hands. "I'll come back to you. You'd better." Her voice was fierce. "Because we're not done yet, Dante Bellini. We're not even close to done." He kissed her once, hard, then forced himself to walk away. The door closed behind him, and Sophia began the long wait, trusting, for the first time in years, that her husband would keep his promise. He came back, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. The Marconi threat had been neutralized permanently, and Dante had made clear to every remaining rival exactly what would happen to anyone who threatened what belonged to him. His wife, his family, his future. Sophia was waiting when he walked through the door at 3 in the morning. She took one look at his face, at the blood on his shirt that might or might not have been his, and pulled him into the bathroom without a word. He let her clean his wounds. He let her peel away the layers of violence that clung to his skin. He let her see the man beneath the monster, vulnerable and broken and desperately grateful that she was still there. "I thought about you," he said quietly as she pressed a bandage to a gash on his forearm. "The whole time. Every time things got dangerous, every time I had to make a decision that could have gotten me killed. I thought about you. About coming home to you." Sophia's hands stilled. "I used to think about the business," he continued, his voice raw. "About the empire, the legacy, the power. But tonight, all I could think about was making it back to you. Making sure I kept my promise." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Is it over? The danger? This particular threat is. But Sophia, my life is never going to be completely safe. There will always be enemies. Always be someone who wants what I have." "I know." She resumed her careful work on his wounds. "I've always known. And you're still here. I'm still here." The words hung between them, weighted with everything they'd survived. Then Dante's hand caught her wrist, stilling her movements. "Marry me again." Sophia's breath caught. "What? Marry me again." His voice was fierce, desperate. "Let me give you the wedding you deserved. Not the rushed ceremony my world demanded, but something real. Something that proves I choose you. Now and always." Tears pricked her eyes. "Dante, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I spent years proving that I couldn't be the husband you needed. But I'm different now, Sophia. You made me different. And I want to stand in front of everyone we know and vow to love you the way I should have from the beginning." The bathroom was silent except for the drip of water and the pounding of two hearts. Sophia thought about all the nights she'd spent alone, all the calls he'd ignored, all the ways he'd made her feel invisible. Then she thought about the journal, the flowers, the daily coffee meetings, the way he'd started coming home for dinner, started asking about her day, started seeing her as something more than a fixture in his controlled world. He had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to deserve this chance. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. Dante pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and for the first time in years, Sophia felt like she was finally home. The morning after Dante's proposal, Sophia woke to find him watching her. It should have been unsettling, the intensity of his gaze, the way his dark eyes tracked her every micro-movement as consciousness slowly returned. But there was something in his expression that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons. Devotion. Raw and unfiltered and completely unguarded. Good morning. His voice was rough with sleep, his tattooed hand reaching across the sheets to trace the line of her jaw. You're staring. I'm memorizing. He shifted closer, his bare chest warm against her shoulder. I spent 3 years looking past you. Now I'm making up for lost time. The words should have been cheesy, should have made her roll her eyes and reach for sarcasm as a shield. Instead, they made her throat tight with emotion. We need to plan a wedding, she said softly. We need to do a lot of things. His mouth brushed her temple. But first, breakfast. When was the last time we ate breakfast together? She couldn't remember. They ate in the kitchen, sitting at the island rather than the formal dining room that had always felt too large for 2 people. Dante made scrambled eggs, badly, it turned out, though Sophia suspected the effort mattered more than the result, while she handled coffee and toast. It was domestic, normal, everything their marriage hadn't been for years. I was thinking, Dante said, scraping burned egg residue into the sink. We could do it here, the wedding, on the rooftop terrace. Just close family and the people who actually matter. Not 1,000 business associates and their networking agendas? He had the grace to look ashamed. No, just us. Just the people who love you. The people who love you. Not who love us or who love the Bellini name. Who love you. Sophia set down her coffee cup. You're really trying. I told you I would. He turned to face her, leaning against the counter, his tattooed forearms crossed over his chest. And I know it doesn't erase what happened. I know there are moments when you look at me and you're wondering if I'm going to slip back into old patterns. But Sophia, he pushed away from the counter, moving toward her with deliberate steps. I almost lost you, and the days you were gone were the worst of my life. Worse than anything the business has thrown at me. Worse than betrayal or assassination attempts or watching deals collapse. Because none of that mattered. None of it has ever mattered, not compared to you. His hands found her waist, pulling her from the stool until she stood pressed against him. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I understand that now. Sophia kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. Not the careful pecks of their recent reconciliation or the desperate grasps of crisis. It was something else entirely. A claiming, a promise, a declaration that she was done holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante's eyes had gone dark with something that made her pulse race. The wedding, he said hoarsely. Soon. I want you to have my name again. I never stopped having your name. Then I want the world to know you chose to keep it. That after everything I put you through, you looked at me and decided I was worth staying for. She traced the tattoos on his neck, feeling his pulse jump beneath her fingers. 3 weeks, she said. I want 3 weeks to plan. And I want Elena there and my cousins from Brooklyn and anyone else I choose. No business associates. No strategic guest lists. Done. And I want you there, present. Not checking your phone. Not disappearing for emergencies. Not letting the world pull you away from the most important moment of our lives. His jaw tightened with determination. I will be there for every second. I swear it. Okay then. She smiled, the expression feeling strange after so long without it. Let's get married. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sophia threw herself into planning with an energy she hadn't felt in years, rediscovering joy in the small decisions. Flower arrangements, menu tastings, the perfect dress. Elena came over daily to help, her sharp commentary a welcome contrast to the professional wedding planners Dante had tried to hire. "Too many lilies," Elena declared, vetoing an elaborate centerpiece design. "Sophia likes roses. Simple, elegant, romantic. Not this botanical explosion." The planner looked offended. "Mrs. Bellini approved this arrangement last week." Mrs. Bellini was being polite because she spent years pretending her opinions don't matter. Elena shot Sophia a pointed look. "That stops now." Sophia laughed, the sound startling even herself. "Elena's right. White roses. Nothing else." The planner made a note, clearly recalibrating their understanding of the dynamic. Dante, true to his word, remained present throughout the process. He attended tastings even when his phone buzzed with urgent messages, offered opinions on color schemes even though he clearly had no preferences, and made sure Sophia knew she was the priority in every interaction. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments when the old Dante surfaced, the cold, controlled mask slipping back into place when business problems demanded his attention. But he caught himself each time, visibly wrestled with the instinct to disappear into work, and forced himself back to her side. Progress. Painful, imperfect, but real. 1 week before the wedding, Marco arrived at the penthouse with news that made Dante's expression go dangerously blank. "We need to talk." His right-hand man glanced at Sophia, clearly uncertain whether to continue in her presence. "Boss, whatever you need to say, you can say in front of my wife." The words settled something in Sophia's chest. Not exclusion. Partnership. Marco nodded slowly. "We've intercepted communications suggesting someone is targeting the wedding. The Calabrese family, they lost significant territory when you took down the Marconis. Now they're looking to make a statement." "What kind of statement?" "The violent kind." Marco's jaw tightened. "They know about Sophia. They know she matters to you, and they're planning to use that." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sophia watched her husband transform, watched the warmth drain from his eyes, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who had survived decades in a brutal world. His tattooed hands flexed at his sides, controlled violence waiting for release. "Tell me everything." Marco outlined the threat in clinical detail. The Calabrese family, led by a man named Victor Calabrese, had apparently decided that attacking Dante's wedding would serve as both revenge for the Marconi situation and a demonstration of their own power. They had resources, connections, and a willingness to sacrifice lives for political points. They were also, according to Marco's intelligence, specifically interested in Sophia. "They see her as your weakness," Marco explained. "They think taking her will break you. They're not wrong." Dante's voice was ice. "Which is why we're going to crush them before they get the chance." "Dante." Sophia stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "We're not canceling the wedding." He turned to her, conflict clear in his expression. "Sophia." "No. Listen to me." She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "For 3 years, I let your world push me aside. I let threats and deals and power struggles become excuses for why we couldn't have a real marriage. I'm not doing that anymore. This isn't about the business pushing us aside. This is about people who want to hurt you. Then protect me. But don't ask me to hide. Don't ask me to cancel the day I've been planning for weeks because someone out there doesn't like you." Her voice strengthened, the fierce determination that had first attracted Dante surfacing after years of suppression. "You promised me you would be different, that you would stop letting everything else come before us. This is your chance to prove it. You're asking me to risk your life for a wedding ceremony? I'm asking you to find a way to have both, to protect me and give me the future you promised." She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Really look, past the fear and the cold calculation to the man underneath. "I believe you can do that. I believe in you." For a long moment, silence held the room. Then Dante's expression shifted, the ice cracking to reveal something more vulnerable beneath. "Okay." His voice was rough. Okay, we'll have the wedding. But we do it my way, security everywhere, every exit monitored, every person vetted. And you stay close to me, the entire time. I was planning to. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. There and gone. Then let's give the Calabrese family something to regret. The days before the wedding became an exercise in controlled chaos. Security teams swept the penthouse rooftop 3 times daily, checking for vulnerabilities and installing surveillance equipment that would have made government agencies jealous. Guest lists were vetted and re-vetted, every name run through databases that tracked criminal affiliations and family connections. The catering staff was replaced with Dante's own people, trained professionals who could handle both appetizers and automatic weapons. Sophia watched it all with a strange sense of calm. She should have been terrified, should have been reconsidering her decision to proceed, calculating the risks, preparing for the worst. But something had shifted in her understanding of her own life. She had spent years being afraid of Dante's world, of his distance, of losing herself in the margins of his existence. That fear had nearly destroyed her, had literally made her sick, Dr. Chen's words echoing in her memory. Chronic neglect. She was done being afraid. If she was going to live in this world, really live, not just survive, then she needed to face it head-on. The dangers, the complications, the constant awareness that her husband's enemies would always see her as a target. Better to be a target standing tall than a victim hiding in the shadows. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for the rooftop ceremony they'd planned. Sophia stood in the bedroom that had once felt like a prison, now transformed by months of healing and hope, and looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was simpler than her first wedding gown. Soft white silk that skimmed her figure rather than encasing it, delicate lace at the shoulders, no train to drag behind her. She'd gained back most of the weight she'd lost, her face no longer gaunt, her eyes no longer shadowed. She looked healthy. She looked alive. Elena appeared behind her in the mirror, eyes suspiciously bright. You look beautiful. I feel beautiful. Sophia turned, pulling her cousin into a hug. Thank you. For everything. For taking me in when I had nowhere else to go. For yelling at me when I needed it. For believing I was worth more than what I'd accepted. You always were. Elena pulled back, gripping Sophia's shoulders. You just needed someone to remind you. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Marco's voice, carefully controlled. It's time. Sophia took a breath. Then she walked toward her second chance. The rooftop terrace had been transformed. White roses cascaded from every surface, just as Sophia had requested. Simple, elegant, romantic. Fairy lights wound through the greenery that lined the space, ready to glow when evening fell. A small group of chairs held the people who mattered most. Elena, Sophia's other cousins, a handful of friends from before her marriage, and the few members of Dante's organization who had proven their loyalty beyond question. No business associates, no networking opportunities, just love. Dante stood at the altar, and the sight of him stopped Sophia in her tracks. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, the collar open just enough to reveal the tattoos that wound around his throat. His hands hung at his sides, knuckles bearing their own dark ink, forearms hidden beneath the jacket sleeves, but their presence felt regardless. He looked exactly like what he was. A dangerous man, powerful and controlled and capable of terrible things. But his eyes held nothing but her. Sophia walked toward him, each step closing the distance she'd once thought would separate them forever. She passed Elena, who was crying openly. She passed Marco, who nodded once in acknowledgement. She passed rows of witnesses who represented the life she'd fought to rebuild. Then she was standing in front of her husband, and the officiant was speaking words she barely heard. The couple has written their own vows. Dante took her hands, his tattooed fingers trembling slightly against hers. Sophia. His voice cracked on her name. 3 years ago, I stood in front of a different altar and promised to love and honor you. I meant every word, but I didn't understand them. I thought loving you was enough, thought the feeling was all that mattered, and the actions would take care of themselves. His grip tightened. I was wrong. I let you fade into the background of my life, Told myself my work was more important. Convinced myself that you would always be there waiting when I finally had time for you. And I almost lost you because of that arrogance. Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks, but she didn't look away. I can't undo those 3 years. I can't erase the loneliness or the pain or the ways I made you feel invisible. But I can promise you, with every breath I have left, that I will never make those mistakes again. You are not the background of my life, Sophia. You are my life. Everything else is just details. He released one of her hands to pull something from his pocket. A simple band of gold, much smaller than the diamond she still wore. This was my grandmother's ring. She gave it to me before she died and told me to save it for the woman I couldn't live without. I didn't understand what that meant until you were gone. Until I was standing in our empty apartment, holding your letter, realizing that I had spent years taking for granted the only person who ever truly mattered. He slid the ring onto her finger, next to the diamond she'd once left behind. I love you, Sophia. Not quietly, not in the margins, not when business allows. I love you out loud, in front of everyone, with every decision I make. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that those aren't just words. The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Sophia blinked away tears, her own vows ready on her tongue. Dante. Her voice was steadier than she expected. I used to think love was supposed to be easy, that if two people cared enough about each other, everything else would fall into place. But I was wrong too. She turned his hand over, tracing the tattoos on his knuckles. Love isn't easy. It's work. It's showing up every day, even when you're tired. It's choosing each other when everything else is demanding your attention. It's being honest about pain instead of suffering in silence. Her eyes met his. I gave up on that for a long time. I let myself disappear because I thought that was what you needed from me. But you didn't need a ghost, Dante. You needed a partner. And I needed you to see me as one. She pulled a ring from her own pocket, a simple band she'd chosen to match his grandmother's ring. I'm not promising to forget what happened. The hurt doesn't just disappear because we've both apologized. But I'm promising to stop running from it, to face it with you, work through it with you, build something new from the pieces of what was broken. She slid the ring onto his finger, watching it settle against his tattooed skin. I choose you, Dante. Not the powerful man everyone else sees. Not the cold exterior you show the world. I choose the man who learned to make breakfast even though he's terrible at it. The man who reads journals about how to be a better husband. The man who stands in the rain for hours just hoping I'll let him apologize. A choked laugh escaped Dante, his composure cracking. I love you, Sophia finished. And I'm not going anywhere. The officiant said something about kissing the bride. Neither of them heard it. Dante pulled her close, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like tears and relief and the beginning of forever. Their guests applauded. And for one perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The moment shattered with gunfire. The sound was distant at first, a sharp crack that most of the guests probably dismissed as a car backfiring somewhere far below. But Sophia felt Dante go rigid against her, felt his protective instincts engage in the split second before chaos erupted. Everyone down. Marco's voice cut through the confusion, sharp and commanding. Inside now. The rooftop transformed into controlled pandemonium. Security personnel who had been posing as waiters dropped their serving trays and drew weapons, forming defensive perimeters around the guests. Elena grabbed Sophia's arm, trying to pull her toward the doors, but Dante got there first. With me. His hand locked around her wrist, pulling her close to his body as he moved toward the nearest exit. His other hand held a weapon that had appeared from somewhere beneath his jacket, smooth and practiced. Another shot rang out, closer this time. A planter exploded 3 feet from where they'd been standing, soil and roses scattering across the terrace. Sniper, Marco reported, pressing a finger to his earpiece. Southeast building. Team 4 is moving to intercept. Dante didn't slow. He pushed Sophia ahead of him into the penthouse, using his body as a shield between her and the open rooftop. More security flooded past them, spreading out to secure the exterior space. return fire crackling in the air. Inside, the chaos felt muted, filtered through walls that suddenly seemed fragile. "Are you hurt?" Dante's hands ran over her, checking for injuries, his expression caught between cold calculation and something that looked like terror. "Sophia, are you hurt?" "I'm fine." She grabbed his searching hands, stilling them. "I'm fine." "But what?" "The Calabrese family." His voice was ice. "They moved faster than we expected." Elena burst through the door behind them, pale but unharmed, followed by several of the other guests. Security herded everyone toward the interior rooms, away from windows, establishing safe zones and defensive positions. "Status." Dante barked the word into his earpiece, his free hand still gripping Sophia's as if afraid she would disappear. "Talk to me." Whatever response came made his jaw tighten. "How many?" Another pause. "Then handle it. And Marco, I want Victor Calabrese. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary." He ended the communication and finally looked at Sophia. Really looked at her, the mask slipping to reveal the fear beneath. "I'm sorry." The words seemed torn from him. "I should have postponed it. I should have waited until—" "Stop." She pulled him toward her, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This isn't your fault. You could have been killed. On our wedding day, in front of everyone, because I underestimated. I'm not killed. I'm here. And you're here." She cupped his face, the same gesture she'd used when they'd first started healing, forcing him to focus. "This is the life we have, Dante. Dangerous and complicated and full of people who want to hurt us. I knew that when I said yes. I still said yes." His forehead fell against hers, his breath shaky. "I can't lose you again. I won't survive it." "Then don't lose me." Her voice hardened with determination. "Stop apologizing for the world you live in and start helping me survive it. I'm not fragile. I'm not the wife who needs to be protected in a bubble. I'm your partner. So partner with me." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then respect, then something fiercer. "What do you need? Tell me what's happening. Don't shelter me from the truth." He hesitated only briefly before responding. "The Calabrese family has about 15 men surrounding the building. Our security is handling the exterior threat, but they're well organized. Better than we expected. The sniper was a distraction. The real attack is coming from the ground floor. They're trying to get inside? They're trying to get to you." His voice went flat. "Victor Calabrese's son was killed during the Marconi conflict. Collateral damage, but Victor blamed me. This is personal." Sophia absorbed the information, her mind racing. "Where are the other guests?" "Safe room, East Wing. Elena is with them." "And if the attackers breach the building?" Dante's expression hardened. "They won't." But even as he said it, the lights flickered, then went out entirely. The darkness lasted only seconds before emergency generators kicked in, bathing the penthouse in red-tinted backup lighting. But those seconds were enough. Glass shattered somewhere nearby. Voices shouted in Italian. Gunfire, closer now, echoing through the halls. Dante moved without hesitation, pushing Sophia toward the nearest door. A secondary bedroom they'd never used, positioned near the safe room's emergency exit. His hand was steady on his weapon, his body positioned between her and every possible threat. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you stay behind me. You don't stop moving. And if I tell you to run, you run. I'm not leaving you." "Sophia." "I said I'm not leaving you." She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a nearby table, the closest thing to a weapon available. "We do this together or not at all." He stared at her for a heartbeat, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then the door at the end of the hallway burst open, and 3 men in tactical gear poured through. Dante fired twice, dropping 2 of them before they could react. The third raised his weapon, aiming not at Dante but at Sophia, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Target acquired," he shouted into his radio. He never finished the transmission. Dante's third shot caught him between the eyes, and he crumpled with the rest. "Move!" Dante grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her over the bodies, toward the secondary exit. The safe room is compromised. We need to get off this floor. They ran through corridors that had once felt like home and now felt like a maze of potential death. More sounds of conflict filtered from other parts of the building. Marco's voice, occasionally, barking orders. Other members of Dante's organization, fighting to protect their boss and the woman he loved. At the stairwell, Dante paused, listening. Footsteps below. Multiple sets. Coming up. Back in trance, he decided, changing direction. Through the study, where his journals were kept, where Sophia had first discovered the depth of his hidden love. Now it served as an escape route, its rarely used exterior access becoming suddenly vital. They were 3 feet from the door when it exploded inward. A man emerged from the smoke and debris, older, silver-haired, with the cold eyes of someone who had ordered countless deaths without flinching. Victor Calabrese. Dante Bellini. Victor smiled, the expression terrible on his lined face. And the lovely bride. How convenient. He wasn't alone. For more men flanked him, weapons trained on both Dante and Sophia, creating a firing squad with nowhere to hide. Dante's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower his own weapon. Victor, you could have done this anywhere else. Any other day. Why my wedding? Why? Victor's voice cracked with rage. Because you took my son from me. At his birthday party, surrounded by his family, in what should have been a moment of joy. An eye for an eye, Bellini. A celebration for a celebration. Your son was running guns through my territory. He knew the risks. He was 23, Victor screamed. He was supposed to inherit everything I built. And you killed him like he was nothing. Sophia's hand found Dante's, squeezing once. Let her go. Dante's voice was ice. This is between us. She has nothing to do with your son. She has everything to do with it. Victor turned his attention to Sophia, his gaze traveling over her with disgusted satisfaction. I watched you for months, Mrs. Bellini. Watched you fade into nothing while your husband spent his nights with another woman. I thought you would break on your own, save me the trouble. But then you left. And then he brought you back, and suddenly you mattered to him again. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Sophia's chest. Now I get to take you from him, just like he took my son from me. The shot never came. Sophia moved without thinking, throwing the crystal vase at Victor's arm, disrupting his aim just as Dante fired. Victor's weapon discharged into the ceiling. Dante's bullet caught one of the flanking men. Chaos erupted. More gunfire. Shouts. The sound of bodies hitting the floor. Sophia found herself pressed against a wall, Dante's body shielding hers, his weapon emptying into the figures who kept coming. Victor was screaming orders. His men were falling. The smoke from the explosion made everything hazy, indistinct. Then suddenly silence. Sophia opened her eyes to find the room transformed into a battlefield. Victor lay on the floor, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. His weapon kicked away by one of Marco's men who had appeared from nowhere. The other attackers were down, dead or incapacitated. She couldn't tell. Dante stood over Victor, his chest heaving, his tattooed hands still gripping his weapon. You should have stayed away from my wife. His voice was barely human. You could have come for me anywhere, anytime, and I would have met you as an equal. But you brought her into this. He pressed his foot against Victor's wounded shoulder, drawing a scream. For that, there's no forgiveness, no negotiation, no mercy. He raised his weapon. Dante. Sophia's voice cut through the blood-red haze. He froze, not looking back but clearly hearing. Don't. She moved toward him, her wedding dress torn and stained with smoke. Not like this. Not on our wedding day. He tried to kill you, and he failed. Because of you. Because you protected me. She placed her hand on his tattooed forearm, feeling the tension thrumming beneath his skin. But if you execute him here, in front of me, on the day we promised each other a new start. She let the words hang. Dante's jaw worked. His weapon stayed raised. For a long moment, she wasn't sure what he would choose. Then slowly he lowered the gun. Marco. His voice was hollow. Take him somewhere quiet. We'll deal with this later. Boss. I said later. Marco hesitated, then nodded to his men. They hauled Victor to his feet, dragging him from the room, his screams of rage echoing down the hallway. The study fell silent. Dante turned to face Sophia, and for the first time since the attack began, the cold calculation dropped from his expression. He looked shattered, exhausted, barely holding together. I almost killed him in front of you. I know. You stopped me. I know that too. He reached for her, his hands shaking. I don't know if I can be the man you deserve. Every time I think I've changed, every time I think I've become better, you listened. She pulled him close, pressing her forehead against his chest. When it mattered most, you listened. That's all I'm asking. Not perfection. Just the willingness to hear me when I speak. His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him with desperate strength. I love you. I love you too. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Now let's finish getting married. The second ceremony happened at midnight. The rooftop was still a crime scene, so they gathered in the penthouse living room instead. The same space where Sophia had once felt invisible, now transformed by candlelight and the presence of people who loved her. Elena had somehow preserved the bouquet of white roses. Marco stood as witness, blood still staining his shirt. And Sophia, in her torn wedding dress with smoke in her hair and adrenaline still coursing through her veins, took Dante's hands and said the words that made them officially married. Again, by the power vested in me, the officiant concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, Dante kissed her before the man finished speaking. It was a different kiss than the one on the rooftop. Less perfect, more desperate, tasting of gunpowder and relief and the ferocious determination of two people who had fought for the right to love each other. The small crowd cheered. Elena was crying again. Marco actually smiled. And Sofia Bellini, née Caruso, once the invisible wife of the most powerful mafia boss on the eastern seaboard, finally understood what it meant to be seen. The months that followed were not easy. There were consequences to deal with. The Calabrese family needed to be dismantled. Victor's remaining loyalists rounded up. The power vacuum filled before other rivals could exploit it. Dante worked long hours, longer than Sophia would have preferred, handling the aftermath of the wedding attack with the cold efficiency his world demanded. But he came home. Every night, no matter how late, he came home. He woke her with soft words about his day. He asked about hers. He showed up for the small moments he'd once dismissed as unimportant. Breakfast together, evening walks, quiet conversations about nothing and everything. He learned, and Sophia healed. The symptoms that had sent her to the emergency room never fully disappeared, but they faded to manageable levels. Dr. Chun called it recovery, though the doctor's expression suggested it was something closer to miracle. Sophia's body had been shutting down from neglect, and now, finally nourished by attention and love, it remembered how to thrive. 1 year after the wedding, the second one, the real one, Dante surprised her with a trip. Not to some exotic destination or luxury resort. Instead, he took her to a small house on the coast of Maine, a property he'd purchased months earlier and kept secret while renovations were completed. A safe house, he explained as they walked through the front door. But not for me. For you. For us. Somewhere to go when my world gets too heavy. Somewhere that's just ours. Sophia wandered through the rooms, taking in the details. It was nothing like the penthouse. Warm wood instead of cold marble, comfortable furniture instead of designer pieces. Walls painted in colors she'd mentioned liking years ago in conversations Dante had apparently remembered. On the mantel, a single framed photograph. Their wedding day. The real one. Both of them dirty and exhausted and laughing. Caught in a moment of pure joy despite everything that had led to it. You did this for me. I did this for us. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. I spent 3 years building an empire I thought mattered. Doesn't. Not without you. So I built this instead. Something real. Something honest. Something that exists just because I love you. She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the familiar tattoos along his neck. I didn't think it was possible, she admitted. When I left that night, I thought we were finished. I thought the man I married was gone forever, replaced by someone who didn't have room for me. He was. Dante's voice was rough. That man was a hollow shell who valued power over love and control over connection. You destroyed him when you walked away. And the man who remains, he's yours. Every piece of him. Even the dark parts? Especially the dark parts. He cupped her face in his tattooed hands. The same hands that had held weapons, signed death warrants, built an empire of blood and money. You've seen the worst of me, Sophia. You've watched me choose wrong, hurt you, nearly lose you, and you're still here. That's not something I take for granted. Not anymore. She kissed him then, soft at first, then deeper, the familiar heat building between them. Stay, he murmured against her mouth. Here with me. Not just for a weekend. For as long as we can manage. The business can wait. Dante Bellini, saying business can wait? Dante Bellini, finally understanding what matters. They stayed for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of quiet mornings and long walks along the rocky coast. 2 weeks of dinners she cooked while he pretended to help, both of them laughing at his continued incompetence in the kitchen. 2 weeks of nights tangled together in the large bed overlooking the ocean, relearning each other's bodies and hearts. When they finally returned to New York, something had shifted permanently. The penthouse no longer felt like a prison, felt like home. 5 years later, Sophia stood at the window of the main house, watching the sun set over the water. Her hand rested on her rounded belly. 7 months along, a daughter who kicked frequently and seemed to share her father's stubborn determination. In the other room, she could hear Dante's voice, deep and rumbling, engaged in a phone call that was probably important, but that he would end the moment she needed him. That was the man he'd become, the man she'd helped him learn to be. The door opened behind her, and his footsteps approached. Beautiful, he murmured, wrapping his arms around her from behind, hands settling on her stomach with reverent care. The sunset. That too. She leaned back against him, safe in a way she'd once thought impossible. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Stepping back from the business? Letting Marco handle the day-to-day? Never. His answer was immediate. I built an empire, Sophia, but I almost destroyed what actually mattered building it. Now I have both the power and the peace. I just finally learned which one to prioritize. Their daughter kicked hard and they both felt it. Dante laughed. A real laugh, the kind she'd rarely heard in the early years of their marriage. She's going to be trouble. Of course she is. She's ours. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, light catching the water and turning it to gold. Somewhere in New York, Marco was handling a crisis that would have once consumed Dante's every waking moment. Here in Maine, none of that mattered. Only this, only them. I love you, Dante said quietly. Every day, every moment, in ways I didn't know I was capable of before you showed me. Sophia turned in his arms, meeting his eyes that had once been cold and unreadable, now warm with devotion she never had to question. I know, she said. You've spent 5 years proving it. I plan to spend the rest of my life doing the same. He kissed her, gentle, reverent, full of promises kept and promises still to come. Outside, the sun continued its descent, painting the world in colors of ending and beginning. Inside, Sophia and Dante Bellini held each other close, two people who had broken apart and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, true, permanent, and finally, enough. The end. Thank you for experiencing this story. If it touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, love is not just a feeling. It's a choice we make every single day. Choose wisely. Choose completely. Choose love.